Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I wasn't supposed to make a video this weekend, but you know what? Things started coming out in the news, so I couldn't help myself. Carriers, owner-operators, drivers have been treated like dirt, especially in the past few years, and honestly, I have had it. I'll tell you about what has been happening in the past week, and then we'll talk about what the trucking industry has become if you are a carrier, owner-operator, or driver. Enough is enough. It's time to make a plan. Ready? Let's go. On the heels of Carrier 411 and this freight guard nonsense comes the lack of movement from the FMCSA on an issue that 3 out of 4 carriers care about: broker transparency. Regardless of whether you're for broker transparency or against it, it's a matter of principle at this point. This is something that carriers have been fighting for a while now because there is zero enforcement on a regulation called 371.3, which is the records to be kept by brokers. Now, you see, the FMCSA requires brokers not just to keep records of every transaction that they have, of every load, but they also require them to share that information with all parties involved. So, for example, if you are a carrier who just transported a load for a broker, you have the full right to ask for those documents, which means you are able to see what the shipper paid, what the broker's margin was, and so on and so forth. This is just the fact of the regulation. Like it or not, it's just the way it is. However, this is not what has been happening. This regulation has not been enforced. And what we have seen is some brokers have now started including, for a while now, including language in their setup documents with a section saying that if you're getting set up with this particular broker, you waive your right to see those records. So basically, carriers are now in a position where either you waive your right to see those records, set up with the broker, and then get a load, or you choose not to get set up with the broker because you don't want to waive your rights and you don't get the load. To top it off, there have been instances where carriers who have asked to see the records have been blacklisted by that broker. Now, again, as I said, this is not an issue of whether you agree with this whole thing of having broker transparency or not. It's a matter of principle. Let me explain. The FMCSA has agreed to issue a rule on the idea of broker transparency. Now, the OOIDA has been fighting for broker transparency for over 4 years, since May of 2020. Initially, the FMCSA agreed to rule on this broker transparency issue in September of 2023. However, they pushed it back to October 31st of 2024. And what do we see now? Radio silence. No rulemaking, not even a notice of a delay. Now, obviously, the OOIDA is pissed, and the president, Todd Spencer, said, and I quote, "It's inexplicable that the FMCSA continues to shrink its basic responsibility and again is kicking the can down the road on a regulation that has been required since 1980. The 150,000 small business truckers OOIDA represents have a simple message to the FMCSA: do your damn job." Now, I wish I could say this is all this video is about: broker transparency, something that has been talked about over and over and over again for the past 4.5 years. But unfortunately, this is not where it ends. Back in November of 2023, there was something that happened that was a pretty big win for carriers, and it had to do with FMCSA ruling on brokers' financial responsibility. So what did this do? Well, I quote, "This took several steps to improve broker security regulations, including the suspension of operating authority if the available financial security falls below $75,000. So basically, if a broker's bond falls below $75,000, they are at risk of losing their authority according to the FMCSA, which means that those brokers that stopped paying their carriers are at risk of completely losing their business. Now, this was supposed to take effect on January 16th of next year, 2025, so just a few months away. But on November 4th of this year, which is on Monday, the FMCSA is going to release a statement saying that they're pushing this to January 16th of 2026, not 2025. And they cite the fact that their new registration system will be available only by January January 16th of 2026, and basically everything should come out at the same time. So what I'm starting to see is a pretty crappy pattern where carriers are pretty much always treated like dirt. And when I say carriers, realistically, I mean carriers, owner-operators, and drivers. So let me go through some examples. There are four parties in a load transaction. There is the shipper, the broker, the carrier, and the receiver. Yet all the responsibility at the end of the day falls with the carrier. Overweight, carrier's fault. CSA score gets affected, which means that you're not able to book as many loads because brokers actually started paying attention to that. Late to pickup, carrier's fault, regardless of the fact that there was traffic on the way, and guess what? The broker is now going to charge you a late fee. If you're late to delivery, still the carrier's fault. It doesn't matter that the shipper just took 15 hours to load and the broker is refusing to pay you detention. On top of that, they're now charging you a late fee for the fact that you are late to delivery. You come to the shipper and the load is extremely overweight, so you refuse to haul it. Well, it's the carrier's fault, and now you're facing a potential freight guard report. Then there's the whole thing of a broker is not going to pay you for the work that you performed. Well, guess what? Now, because of Carrier 411, you're facing a potential freight guard for actually filing on the broker's bond. And to top it off, the FMCSA is now delaying the financial responsibility rule for brokers, which makes it possible for brokers that are no longer paying carriers to continue to operate as if nothing happened. What I am seeing is that carriers are being held to the highest of standards by brokers, the federal government, the state laws, and hell, it sometimes feels like if you are a carrier and you sneeze at the wrong time, you are at risk of losing your business. But the issues that carriers face on a day-to-day basis are either completely overlooked or put aside as if it's not something that important. I personally feel like the box I was put into as a carrier, full of regulations and rules, is starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller. The walls are closing in, and I have no way to move. I get overregulated, and when I say I mean any carrier out there. I get overregulated, not just on a federal level, not just on a state level, but now on a professional level as well, due to websites like Carrier 411 or a system like Highway. But the worst part, often these regulations that are placed on us by the government completely contradict the regulations, the rules that are placed on us on a professional level by brokers. You better not speed, but if you're late to pick up, we'll make sure to write you up, put a note in our system, potentially put a freight guard on you, or just take away money from you. You better not violate your hours of service, but if you're late to delivery, we are going to cut $1,000 off your rate. True story. You better not be overweight, but if you cancel a load because it was overweight, guess what? We're going to put a freight guard on you for being a fall off. So I'm pissed. This is getting out of hand at this point, and I only have one question. Did people forget who we actually are? Do people forget what we actually do? Or is everyone all of a sudden okay with just not being able to get the stuff they need? Like, food, building materials, Christmas gifts, furniture, appliances, and so on and so forth. Because most of that stuff in our country moves via truck. And in case people forgot or are confused about who we are and what we do, maybe it's time to remind them. I will leave you with that. Let's make a plan. See you in the next video.